It is January 24th, 41 AD, and a man named Cassius Chaerea is standing in a narrow corridor beneath the Palatine Palace, waiting for the emperor to walk past him. Chaerea is a tribune of the Praetorian Guard. He is 58 years old, one of the most decorated soldiers in the Roman army, a man who fought under Germanicus in Germania when the current emperor was still a boy. He has been chosen for what is about to happen for a reason no one says out loud. His voice is high-pitched, and for 2 years, the emperor has mocked him for it in front of junior officers, assigning him passwords like "kiss me" and "little girl," forcing him to speak them aloud each morning, while men half his age tried not to laugh. Chaerea has a sword under his cloak. He is waiting. The man he is waiting for is Gaius Caesar Augustus Germanicus. Rome calls him Caligula. He has been emperor for 3 years, 10 months, and 8 days. He is 28 years old. He has just eaten lunch, and he is walking toward this corridor to reach the theatre at the Palatine Games, talking with 2 boys from a noble family in Asia who have come to perform. He does not know that 7 of his own officers have decided he will not survive the next 10 minutes. This is not the story of a mad emperor cut down by soldiers who could no longer bear his executions. The executions were expected. Rome had survived Tiberius. What Chaerea and the 6 men behind him were avenging was something Roman aristocrats had no public language for. Something the emperor had been doing to their wives, their sons, and their own bodies for 2 years, in front of witnesses, in rooms they were not permitted to refuse to enter. The passwords Chaerea was forced to speak were the smallest part of it. In the next 10 minutes, Caligula will be stabbed 30 times in this corridor. His wife will be run through by a centurion within the hour. His 1-year-old daughter will die against a palace wall at the hands of the same officer. The Senate will convene in emergency session and vote to abolish the imperial system itself, to restore the republic that Augustus ended 70 years earlier. Within 24 hours, that restoration will collapse. And the reasons it collapsed are the reasons the Roman Republic never came back. The trigger for all of it was standing in a corridor with a sword under his cloak, listening for footsteps. To understand why 7 officers chose to end a dynasty by killing an infant, you have to understand what Rome believed. It had gained when the boy called Little Boot arrived at the palace in March of 37 AD. The Emperor Tiberius died on the island of Capri on March 16th of that year. He was 77. He had spent his last 11 years ruling Rome by letter, refusing to enter the city he governed. His will named 2 heirs, Tiberius Gemellus, his natural grandson, aged 17, and Gaius, aged 24, the son of Germanicus, the general Rome had loved and lost. The Senate heard the will read aloud, and then it did something it had not done in 50 years. It voted unanimously. The joint inheritance was rejected. The entire empire went to Gaius alone. The crowds that lined the road into Rome called him our star and our chick and our little one. His father had been poisoned in Syria in 19 AD under circumstances that pointed toward Tiberius himself. His mother and his 2 elder brothers had been exiled and starved or driven to suicide. Gaius had survived because Tiberius took him to Capri, where the boy spent 6 years living under the direct supervision of the old emperor, watching him conduct purge trials against the Senate by mail. When the survivor arrived in Rome, the Senate saw the son of Germanicus and a young man with no known crimes. That was what they saw. It was not what had arrived. The first 8 months looked like restoration. He recalled the exiles. He published the imperial account books, which no emperor had done. He suspended the treason trials, restored elections, staged games, and paid cash bonuses to the army and the people. Philo of Alexandria, who was alive to see it, wrote that the empire felt as if the age of Augustus had returned. Then, in October of 37 AD, Caligula fell ill. The record calls it a brain fever. He was near death for weeks. The Senate voted public prayers. A knight named Publius Afranius Potitus swore in public that he would give his own life if the gods spared the emperor. Caligula recovered in November. He had Potitus arrested and executed, on the reasoning that a vow made to the gods would be impious to leave unfulfilled. The Senate laughed carefully. Potitus was one man, and he had asked for it. But something else happened during that illness that the record preserves without explaining. Tiberius Gemellus, the 17-year-old the Senate had disinherited, received an order delivered in the emperor's name from his sickbed. He was to cut his own throat. He did. No senator raised the matter afterward. And when Caligula stood up from that illness, the sources begin describing him in a different vocabulary. The Senate did not yet have the language to notice. It would learn the language one dinner at a time. The first word arrived in the Senate chamber itself. The record says Caligula began referring to himself as Dominus, master, the word a slave uses for the man who owns him. Augustus had banned it from imperial usage. Tiberius had banned it. Caligula spoke it in front of senators who had known him as a child, and the senators did not object because they could not yet imagine what objecting would cost. The dinners changed next. The Roman convivium had always been a controlled political space. 9 guests, 3 couches, precedents observed like law. Caligula's dinners now placed his 3 sisters on the principal couches, Julia Livilla, Agrippina the younger, and Julia Drusilla, the one he loved. The guests were uncertain where to look, and the sources record why. What was happening between the emperor and his sisters was not concealed. A later chronicler, working from records now lost, wrote that it had begun when Drusilla was still a child and Gaius was 14, and that their grandmother had found them in bed together. The senators at those dinners were expected to eat and not react. They ate. They did not react. That skill would be tested far harder than they knew. Then Drusilla died on June 10th of 38 AD at 21. Caligula shaved his head and wandered the empire for weeks. He declared her a goddess, the first woman in Roman history to be officially deified, and made it a capital offence to laugh or bathe or dine with family during the morning. A knight was executed for selling hot water. When the emperor returned to Rome, the record says he came back changed, not sadder, colder, and he came back to an empty treasury. Tiberius had left a surplus of more than 2 billion sesterces. The games, the bonuses, and the doles had burned through it in under 2 years. What Caligula introduced to replace it was not a tax. It was an instrument, a senator accused of treason, and the accusations were multiplying, could keep his life by making a gift of his estate to the emperor. The old families began to disappear one by one, their children inheriting nothing, and their widows, in the months that followed, began appearing at the palace in numbers the Senate had no vocabulary for either. In February of 39 AD, the emperor suspended the treason trials, and the Senate voted him a golden shield in gratitude. 2 months later, he reinstated the trials without warning and explained that he had been testing them. He wanted to know whether they would police themselves, or whether he would have to make them. From now on, he announced, the Senate would address him not as princeps, but as dominus. The word entered the official record. Whatever this had been, it was becoming something else. In September of 39 AD, the emperor hosted a dinner at the Palatine that set the template for everything that followed. Attendance was compulsory, senators with their wives. The women arrived in the stola and palla, the layered garments a Roman matron wore to announce her station. Caligula watched them enter. Then he ordered his slaves to move down the line and strip the garments from every senator's wife. He wanted to see them, he explained, in a conversational tone. The women stood undressed before their husbands, before each other, before the court. To speak was treason. To move was treason. The senators reclined and said nothing. Livia Orestilla was at that dinner. She had married the senator Gaius Calpurnius Piso earlier that same day, and the emperor had attended the wedding. During the meal, Caligula ordered her brought to him, informed Piso that he was divorced effective immediately, took Orestilla to his own chambers, and returned to announce that he had married her himself. 2 months later, he divorced and exiled her. Piso would be exiled the following year for allegedly attempting to see his own former wife. In one evening, Roman marriage law, the foundation of the aristocratic class, had ceased to exist inside the palace walls, and the record preserves the procedure the dinners settled into. The emperor would move among the reclining guests, stop at the couch of a senator whose wife he had noticed, and order her to leave the hall with him. He would return with her a quarter of an hour later, recline again, and then aloud, in detail, evaluate her body and her performance for the assembled guests, sometimes with praise, sometimes with mockery, while the husband was required to remain on his couch, smiling, eating, pretending he had heard nothing. Some of them stopped pretending. In late 39 AD, Piso began speaking quietly with Lentulus Gatulicus, the governor of Upper Germania, and with Marcus Aemilius Lepidus, the emperor's own brother-in-law and lover. The plot was discovered before it launched. Gatulicus was executed on the frontier. Lepidus was executed in Rome. The emperor's 2 surviving sisters, who had shared Lepidus's bed and his conspiracy, were exiled to the Pontian Islands. And when Caligula returned to Rome in the spring of 40 AD, he made the change that turned humiliation into administration. Wives would now be brought to the palace on a rotating schedule, summoned or not. The husbands would deliver them, the husbands would wait outside, the husbands would bring them home. The sources call what follows madness. The record they preserve describes a system. But this was only the beginning. You're watching a reconstruction of a program the surviving sources call madness because the Roman aristocracy had no other vocabulary for it. Suetonius and Cassius Dio recorded what they were told, and what they were told was consistent. This channel builds every documentary from what the sources actually preserved rather than what the tradition summarized. If that is the kind of history you want, subscribe before the emperor returns to Rome. He returned in the spring of 40 AD from a war that produced no fighting. His army had marched to the shore of the English Channel, where he ordered the men to gather seashells into their packs as spoils taken from Neptune. He came home demanding a triumph. The Senate refused him. He entered the city anyway, and the refusal is remembered now as one of the last independent acts that body ever performed. Because by summer, the rotation schedule was fully operational. The palace kept the calendar. Senators were notified which day their wives were required. Some women were returned within hours, some were kept overnight, some were exiled the next morning. The Senate of Rome, still technically the highest political body in the world, could no longer convene without a majority of its members having recently passed through that schedule. Its votes were unanimous. It voted whatever it was told. Remember the Golden Shield, voted in gratitude for a mercy that turned out to be a test. Every honor the Senate now voted was the same shield, offered again and again to a man who collected them the way he collected estates. And at a banquet that summer, he noticed a young man of 18 sitting beside his father. The father was Publius Nonius Asprenas, consul designate for the coming year. The emperor proposed, pleasantly, that the son fight in the imperial games. The father declined with respect, the son declined with respect. The emperor said nothing. 3 weeks later, the games were announced. Asprenas was required to attend as a magistrate. His son was required to fight. The son died on the sand, while the father watched from the magistrate's box, and the law did not permit him to resign. So he continued to serve, attending the dinners, attending the Senate, offering the votes of thanks. 6 months later, in a corridor beneath the palace, he was one of the 7 men standing behind Cassius Chaerea. The machinery kept expanding. The emperor began auctioning the property of the men he had destroyed, appearing at the auctions himself, calling out bids and nodding towards senators in the crowd, whose nods back were legally binding. One senator, Aponius Saturninus fell asleep in his seat. The emperor announced that the sleeping man was bidding on every lot. Saturninus woke to find he had purchased 13 gladiators